It's not magic. So embodiment, I work with embodiment, the subjective view of the body. This goes across, for example, yoga, dance, martial arts. I use this in business, with aid workers, all sorts of reasons. And this work with the body can seem kind of magic to people because it's really powerful. You know, when you start working the body, you get insights, your life changes, you develop yourself. That's really cool, and it's so strong. People go, wow, I don't understand how it works, it's magic. Some people are also very invested in this point of view. They like to be seen as magicians because then they can charge a lot of money and you can't do it, and they can say, look, I have this special power that you don't. I think this is absolute bullshit. So I don't think it's magic at all. I mean, there is a certain mystery to the body. There's certainly an intuitive element of when we tune in. It's powerful and deep and in some ways a little strange. But the principles of working with embodiment are very clear. So I've drawn these out over the years. I looked at all my different teachers and different ways of doing embodiment, and I said, well, hang on, they're really just doing a few things. Yeah, it was like the complexity became clear, the fog cleared, and I realized it's really just a very simple set of principles they're using. The main one being awareness and choice, right? So we're creating awareness of different patterns, like how am I standing, how am I breathing, how am I moving now, or whatever, and then we create choices for different ways of doing things. Yeah. Very, very simple. If you have some choices, you have some range, you have more freedom, more responsiveness to different things. This is one of the basic underlying principles. Another one would be like contrast. You know, we can learn by contrasting different ways of doing things. There's a simple principle. Wendy Palmer kind of identified that one of my teachers. There's a principle around centering. So this is a way of regulating the fight-flight response. This one comes from Paul Linden. What we saw was there's all these different ways of doing like grounding or centering or whatever, but there's a very clear principle for teaching that safely and effectively, and you can look at the videos if you want more detail on any of these principles. In the end, we came up with about 13 principles now, and they're more like algorithms, actually, would be more accurate. They're ways of looking at embodied work that make what people are doing very clear, very simple. The beauty of that is, A, you can learn so much quicker. Like, I've saved my students years in terms of the learning curve. The second thing is you can be generative. You can be creative. So let me give you an example. If we work with the centering principle, part of that is we trigger the fight-flight response in a safe way. So Paul Linden uses tissues. He throws tissues at people and you flinch. You can use grabs. There's different ways to do it. One of my students was working with young people on a hot day, and they decided to use a water pistol. You squirt someone with a water pistol and they flinch, and then you can work with that. It's really good fun. Like the cameraman's smiling now. It's like a really cool way to do it. Yeah, he's never seen me do that because we're in Moscow now. So yes, in Moscow in the winter, you don't do that. But what was really cool is that my student generated her own way of doing it that was completely appropriate to the group she was working with. Yeah. So let's say you work with grabs. Well, that's great. You've learned how to do a grab, and someone has a fight-flight response, then you help them center and reduce that. But if that's the only thing you know, what are you going to do when you're in, say, an Islamic country where you're not allowed to touch the women? What are you going to do? Yeah, you're screwed, right? But if you know the principle, you can say, okay, let's work with a clap, or let's work with a tissue, or let's work with a word, or a million other things. So once you understand these principles, it saves you lots of time. You'll just do things much, much clearer, and you're generative in terms of doing it in your own way to fit the environments you're in. So the same with the exam criteria we have. So we have an exam on the embodied facilitated course. That's what I'm sort of plugging. And on the embodied facilitated course, we have these very set criteria for the exams. And we actually have, I think, 5 people trained to do the exams now. That's it, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 5. And they all examine with about 80 to 90% agreement, despite independently rating people, because the criteria are actually pretty objective. If, for example, someone hasn't given a clear aim, they haven't shown application, they're not listening or connected to the group, they're not centered themselves, these things generally, ethical principles, of course, these things generally we agree on when we examine completely separately, because you can see them. It's not magic. Now, there's no substitute for experience, but if you do these things, and we can teach them in a year, if you do these things, the quality of what you're doing. We have one on language use, for example, and my students always joke that I ruin their yoga classes, because once they understand these kind of better ways of giving clear, what we call operational instructions, the average yoga or dance class just seems sort of horrible. It's just like, oh my God, this is so unclear. Yeah. So you can teach these standards once you know what they are. And again, we've drawn them out. It's not magic. It's really straightforward. So yes, we can be beautiful and creative, and can seem like magic and it can feel like magic, but it's actually quite clear. So my message really to the embodiment community that are out there is like, have a look at this stuff, and also like, you know, let's raise our standards a little bit. Let's stop pretending we're magicians and realize that a lot of what we're doing is really just sort of engineering. It's quite technical, really, when you look at it. And that, you know, there's real poetry too. There's real poetry too. I'm not denying that, but let's be clear. Let's stop pretending we're magicians. And if you're students and you want to learn this, obviously this is a plug for our way of doing it, because it's really clear. There's a structure. You can learn it. Embodied Facilitated course, look at the website, embodiedfacilitated.com. Lots of free resources, videos that can show the principles in action, with videos on coaching clients, free ebooks, trainers around the world. If you're looking to contact someone, have a look at that.